Why would you put a kid on that when you see how nice and kind he is now that he's off of it?
It started with a diagnosis of attention deficit disorder. But for the boy you're about to meet, it was just the beginning of a long and painful journey. He wound up in the care of Children's Aid Society and on an increasing amount of medication. Now he's safe in his grandparents' care, but they have a lot of questions about how such a young boy was prescribed so many drugs. Because of his age, we've concealed the identity of the family. Michelle Chung tells us their story and how they're finding normal.
How would you describe yourself to someone who doesn't know you?
Nice. Not very calm at times. Very good at biking. Not too good at skateboarding, but still like to sit on the skateboard and zip down hills.
As long as he's moving, he's free from his memories.
I didn't really think about much. I was always tired. My arms and stuff, I couldn't get out of bed often.
2 years on, Jay's transformed, a relief to his grandparents.
He just loves to laugh. He's just a completely different kid from those times before.
Those times, the 15 months he spent as a ward of the Durham Children's Aid Society on sometimes crippling doses of medication.
I couldn't stand up. I hardly could climb the stairs. I pretty much had to crawl the stairs.
It was like the life in his body was being drained out of him.
Early family photos reveal a happy, healthy child, but his young parents struggle with a variety of mental health problems. Problems they see reflected in their son, complaining he's aggressive and inattentive. 3 months shy of his 6th birthday, Jay's pediatrician diagnoses attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. The doctor prescribes the stimulant Ritalin. But his parents aren't satisfied with the diagnosis. Over the next 2 years, they take the boy to several psychiatrists. One adds Tourette's syndrome, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder to the boy's expanding diagnoses. Another doctor suspects the boy has a form of autism called Asperger's. Yet another adds bipolar disorder or manic depression to the list. While most kids his age are learning to tell time, Jay is learning to keep a pill schedule of antidepressants, anticonvulsants, stimulants, and tranquilizers. But his parents still can't cope with his disruptive behavior. Eventually, the Durham CAS steps in and seizes the 8-year-old. It places Jay in this group home an hour northeast of Toronto. Youth Connections is a privately run residence for troubled boys, children diagnosed with severe emotional and behavioral disorders. By seizing Jay, the Children's Aid Society should be taking the boy out of a bad situation and putting him into a better one. But his 15-month stay at this group home only makes matters worse. By the time his grandparents take Jay out, there will be another psychiatrist, more medication, and more anguish.
You know how you feel when you have a headache? Like, make that headache outside of your head and around you. That is sort of like a way to describe how the group home atmosphere felt like. Not very happy.
Jay shares a room with another boy and stays out of trouble at first. Soon, group home workers complain about Jay's escalating bad behavior to the group home psychiatrist, Dr. Albert Masabke. Quite unfocused, when upset he becomes very unstable, makes comments such as, "I want to die." Dr. Masabke responds by introducing Jay to yet another drug, an antipsychotic drug called Seroquel. By now, Jay's maternal grandparents have become actively interested in raising him. but they're frustrated by the limited access imposed by the Durham CAS.
They really didn't want to give him over to us, but we weren't about to stop fighting for him.
Oh, that dog? You want me to hold him?
Initially, Durham CAS allows his grandparents to see Jay twice a week for a couple of hours. Sometimes they venture no further than a parking lot. But it's a welcome escape and a chance to observe Jay's behavior.
I think that one on this side is trying to say to the one on this side that he loves her.
Oh, well, isn't that nice?
They love those visits and hate them.
I would sit in the back of the van and he would just lay on me, hold me, Mama, he would say, you know, and he would just feel like you could feel his body sinking after taking the medications. It made me very, very angry to have to give him these pills.
As his legal guardian, Jay's children's aid worker has signed a medical consent form allowing the psychiatrist to increase the boy's medication. With continued reports of Jay acting out, the doctor does increase the boy's medications 6 times in less than a year. The grandparents tell the CAS they want the pills to stop, but they have no legal rights. The Children's Aid Society won't even tell them what the pills are. So his grandmother decides to find out.
Hi, I wondered if you could help me.
Sure.
I had these pills given to me to give to my grandchild, and I have no idea what they are. I wondered if you could identify them
Sure, I'll have a look
for me.
Methylphenidate, 10 milligram, made by Pharmascience.
And
It's
what?
Ritalin.
Ritalin?
Divalproic acid.
What's that for?
It's classified as an anticonvulsant drug.
I don't have no idea what this one is either.
Oh, this is Seroquel.
Seroquel, an antipsychotic drug used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder in adults. It also acts as a sedative. A 25 milligram dose can knock out some grown-ups. Seroquel has not been proven safe or effective in children.
Technolab brand, but it's the same.
You always feel tired. When you wake up, it's like you can't get out of bed, but then like you have to, and you go to school. The highest grade level I got when I was 9 years old in the group home was about kindergarten.
We could see the steady progression of him going downhill, him getting skinnier and skinnier.
The grandparents apply to become Jay's legal guardians.
Come back this way and aim right for me.
After 10 months, the Durham CAS calls in clinical psychologist Marty Mackay to assess whether the grandparents would make fit guardians of the boy.
Before I met the child, I conducted a review of all the file materials at the Children's Aid Society, over 1,000 pages. And I thought I was going to be dealing with a very troubled, dysfunctional child.
Had that little change counting machine.
Over several months, Mackay observes Jay while he's visiting with his family. She finds him happy and enthusiastic with his grandparents. She too notices that after Jay takes his medication, he changes.
Approximately 15 minutes later, he was not reasonable anymore. He couldn't process information. He would be acting in a random fashion and sometimes go into a rage.
She voices her alarm in her final report to the Durham Children's Aid Society. I am quite concerned that the boy is receiving dangerously high levels of medication and that this regime has no actual treatment value, but is primarily, if not wholly, designed to suppress symptoms. Mackay recommends the child live with his grandparents. The court agrees. As Jay settles in with his grandparents, they look for help to take him off the medications prescribed at the group home.
What time is that?
They find Dr. Wendy Roberts at the Hospital for Sick Children,
Hi, good, you're here. Okay.
a pediatrician who helps untangle multiple diagnoses in kids. When she meets the 9-year-old, he's consuming a combination of 50 milligrams of Ritalin, 500 milligrams of Divalproax, and 500 milligrams of Seroquel every day.
On the whole, all of the classes of drugs were at the higher level of what you would typically expect to be seen used in children.
Under Dr. Roberts' direction, his grandparents carefully wean the boy off his drugs, bit by agonizing bit.
He would pour sweat. He had fevers. He would see bugs where there were no bugs. He was delirious.
His detox takes 10 months.
We felt that he was more connected with us, happier, and had less anxiety when he was drug-free. That doesn't happen in every child.
What conditions do you now assess him with?
I think he continues to have an attention problem. I think he focuses best one-on-one in a very supportive, structured environment.
Is he bipolar, though, or does he have Tourette's?
We have no suggestion at this time that he would meet criteria for bipolar disorder, and he's still young for that, and he would not meet criteria for Tourette syndrome at this point.
What about, I think there was obsessive-compulsive Asperger's?
He's not. He does not have Asperger disorder. He does not meet criteria for an obsessive-compulsive disorder at this time.
The boy thrives on his grandparents' farm. He gains weight, going from 29 to 45 kilograms in just 3.5 months.
In the first, I think, 8 months, he grew 4 inches. And we were told by his pediatrician that it was the drugs that was stunting his growth.
Should be easier and safer.
While his grandparents are delighted he's doing so much better, 4 months into his detox, they are still troubled by some disturbing behavior. At night, he refuses to go up to his room on his own. He wakes up crying. He wets the bed. His grandparents learn the scars from the group home run deeper than they feared. While being interviewed by an advocacy group, he asks to be left alone with the camera.
Okay. What happened? Okay. It never happens in the day. The group home staff never check up on us. So they're always down watching TV.
He describes having been sexually assaulted repeatedly by another resident at the group home.
This is the truth, and I did not tell it to my grandma before. I was too embarrassed to even tell it to her.
While Jay's revelation is new to his grandparents, it appears the Durham Children's Aid Society knew something was wrong early on. A month after Jay moved into the Youth Connections group home, his CAS caseworker wrote this note in her file. Jay has experienced inappropriate sexual behavior. In hindsight, his grandparents believe that Jay suffered from a disturbing sequence of events.
The more he acted out, the more he got drugged. We saw the more and more drugging came after he had been sexually abused.
Only after Jay settles in with his grandparents is his former roommate at the group home convicted of sexually assaulting the boy. When we come back, understanding what happened to Jay.
Why would you put a kid on that when you see how nice and kind he is now that he's off of it?
Jay's long nightmare is over. He's been out of the group home for more than 2 years, off his medications for 1. Medications he doesn't need for conditions he doesn't have. Jay's dancing to his own tune, trying to put the past behind him. But he still has questions about the drugs he was prescribed.
Why would you put a kid on that when you see how nice and kind he is now that he's off of it? Why would you do it in the first place?
To understand what happened to Jay, you need to look at the conditions here at this group home. An environment of kids in crisis, of staff and a doctor under pressure. If Jay was ever going to get off his medication, this was not the place to be. Pediatrician Dr. Wendy Roberts.
Once children are in a group home situation, if they're getting a relatively brief assessment from a clinician who may well be overworked and has a very short period of time, there's a tendency just to have the medication increased rather than to go through a systematic kind of withdrawal and careful look.
With each diagnosis came more medication and the possibility of drug side effects.
This boy had been diagnosed with ADHD and was prescribed Ritalin at quite high dosages, and it's a well-known fact that Ritalin, especially at high dosages, can cause tics. So when he started demonstrating this side effect, he was then diagnosed as having Tourette's syndrome.
If a drug makes you feel dizzy or miserable or unwell, then you might act more irritable, more upset, you might be more explosive, you might look aggressive.
In their reports to the psychiatrist, group home workers often did describe Jay as irritable, upset, and aggressive. They also noted Jay was at times incontinent and slow with routines. But they never made a connection between Jay's behavior and possible drug side effects, with one exception. About 5 weeks after Jay was started on Seroquel, the group home supervisor suggested that some of Jay's behavior might be related to the boy's new medication, stating that Jay has appeared to be more defiant towards staff since the med began. Still, it seems the staff's ability to identify possible side effects was uneven at best.
One worker laughed and said, "Oh, he did a face plant in his food." They gave him his medication at supper time during the week, and he just fell forward into his food.
In a letter defending his treatment of Jay, the psychiatrist, Dr. SOWK, acknowledges he relied in large part on the group home workers to tell him if the boy showed any adverse reactions. SOWK wrote, "There was no report of any side effects."
Some of the workers are wonderful at coming in and telling us what goes on. Others are very inexperienced and don't necessarily know what you need to hear.
But clinical psychologist Marty Mackay says in some cases, the dynamic can involve more than inexperience.
The labeling is often done by people who have a vested interest in the children being compliant, such as group home workers, who may fill out a checklist and check off things that make a child appear to have ADHD or Tourette's syndrome or bipolar, and the psychiatrist simply writes out prescriptions.
Dr. Roberts says she has seen many cases where children's behavior worsens in care. Still, Jay's case shook her.
This is one of the most, I think, severe situations that I have come across. It's not unique. There are lots of children, particularly in the child welfare system, who have a lot of behaviors that have really been exaggerated by very unfortunate interactions between their own relatives, other caregivers, and clinicians who are often feeling very uncomfortable with dealing with the complexity of what they're being asked to consult to.
And that, Mackay says, is also what happened to Jay. As his conditions worsened, his behavior deteriorated.
He was angry. He was often angry that he was in this group home. Later on, I found out that he had more reason to be angry than I knew at the time that I was doing the assessment. That was later. He began to disclose that he had been repeatedly sexually abused while in the group home.
If you get a call from a environment, from some home every day saying behavior's out of control, staff are threatened, things are not feeling good, the natural inclination is to increase the dose of medication.
The grandparents, along with Mackay, lodged a complaint with the College of Physicians and Surgeons, a self-regulating professional body. They accused Dr. SOWK of failing to adequately diagnose and treat Jay. Last spring, the college cleared the psychiatrist, concluding, the medications and dosages prescribed by Dr. SOWK are standard and are medications commonly prescribed for young patients in similar situations with good effect. Mackay and the grandparents have appealed the decision.
About your connection with
Dr. SOWK refused to comment on this story. Youth Connections would not talk to us. The Durham CAS declined our request for an on-camera interview. It would only provide a written statement. It says its policy on giving children the types of drugs Jay was on is in compliance with ministry regulations. In fact, the law in Ontario requires the risks and side effects of each drug be set out on medical consent forms before medications are administered to children like Jay. The consent form signed by Jay's CAS guardian and the group home psychiatrist did not. The law also gives the government the green light to set up an independent board to review and investigate cases like Jay's. That board could recommend medications be adjusted, reduced, even stopped. Thing is, that board has never been set up. That decision rests with the Minister of Children and Youth Services. After being assessed by more than 70 doctors in 11 years, Jay is now focused on making up lost ground.
Like, you can learn a lot more being where people actually want to teach you and where you have friends to encourage you and stuff.
Oh, did you know to read one page of Chinese? You need to know over 3,000 different of those little picture things.
Really?
And there's like 50,000?
50,000.
Probably to read a book.
He no longer wakes during the night crying, but he still won't go up to bed on his own.
I don't know.
It can be a normal thing, watching television, and something will remind him of an event that took place within the group home. And we have to deal with that and comfort him and help him through it and tell him that he'll never go back there again.
But going forward is going to be a challenge for his grandparents. Their fight for Jay has drained their savings.
Our Father in God, we just thank you for the day you've given us.
And now they're making room for another, their granddaughter. She was also a ward of the Durham Children's Aid Society. Since moving in with her grandparents, she's completed a drug reduction program similar to that of her older brother.
One of my greatest compassions now are for other people out there going through the same thing as we are. And when you're in the middle of it, you feel like you have no hope. And when you get out of it, you say, I'm thankful it's over. And you pick up the pieces and you keep going.
Michelle Chung, CBC News, Toronto.